There's a peculiar tension that lives at the edge of human awareness, an unspoken frontier where intuition meets the sensory world, yet remains unacknowledged by the rational mind. You can feel in those fleeting moments when something inside you whispers a quiet wait, or turn here, or look again, and for a breathless instant, reality seems to bend around that whisper as though it has been waiting for you to notice. These moments are usually dismissed as coincidences, quirks of chance, stray thoughts with no more substance than a passing breeze. And yet, if you look closely enough, you begin to notice a strange pattern. The breeze seems to blow exactly when you need it, nudging you away from paths that would have brought bitterness, or toward places that were designed, almost meticulously, to unfold something long hidden. To call this phenomenon intuition is only partially correct, because intuition suggests a hunch, a soft knowing, something subtle. But what we are exploring here is more deliberate, more architectural in its precision. It is a silent language of the soul, speaking not in words but in symbols and patterns. It is a sensation that the events you label as chance are actually threads in a larger tapestry, and that your life, however chaotic or tangled it may appear, unfolds according to a deeper logic that you were not taught to see. The soul in this context is not some abstract metaphysical idea reserved for mystics and poets. It is the part of you that perceives existence beyond the narrow window of the physical senses. It plays the long game of your evolution, intervening in ways that the conscious mind often overlooks. The difficulty arises because the soul does not communicate the way the mind expects. It doesn't send you an email, a text message, or a neatly formatted directive. Instead, it works through what seem like disruptions or alignments, a sudden delay that keeps you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, a meeting with a stranger who somehow alters the trajectory of your inner world, a repeated symbol, numbers, dreams, sensations that appear so consistently you almost fear acknowledging it, or a subtle discomfort that warns you to withdraw from certain people or environments, even when there is no logical reason for doing so. These are the warnings, the signals, the signposts. But because they do not arrive packaged as spiritual messages, you wave them away as coincidences, nerves, or imagination. There is an irony in this dismissal, because deep down, you have always sensed that life contains layers you were never taught to read, that events repeat, because you did not learn their underlying lesson, that your body tenses around the truth even before your mind catches up, that every unexplainable moment carries a faint echo of something ancient, an intelligence beneath the surface of your daily motions. You may not have words for it, but you feel it as a presence, an observer inside the quiet spaces of your awareness. When you call these experiences coincidences, you are not rejecting truth so much as protecting yourself from its magnitude. A coincidence is harmless. A coincidence requires no interchange. But a message from the soul implies responsibility, awareness, participation in your own destiny. And the world rarely teaches humans how to hold such weight. To understand these warnings, you must first recognize that you live in a world where the invisible often precedes the visible. Long before events materialize, they ripple through your inner landscape. You might feel a subtle heaviness before a difficult chapter begins, or an inexplicable excitement before a breakthrough appears. You might sense a decay in a relationship before a single word of conflict is spoken. You might dream of separation long before life demands it. The physical world moves slowly compared to the speed of the inner planes, where the soul resides. This is why warnings appear as feelings, intuitions, synchronicities, or symbolic patterns. They reach you early, ahead of time, urging you to adjust your course before the external world crystallizes the consequences. If you pay attention to these signals, life transforms from a series of random events into a conversation. The soul speaks, the world echoes, you respond. Patterns align, guiding you toward environments where you expand rather than shrink. Opportunities find you at the exact moment you are prepared to receive them. Challenges arise with perfect timing to cultivate a strength you did not realize you were capable of. Nothing feels accidental. Everything becomes part of an unfolding architecture designed to bring you back into alignment with who you truly are. And perhaps this is the greatest secret. The soul is not trying to control you or limit you. It is trying to restore you to a path you unconsciously drifted away from. Why, then, is it so difficult to recognize these messages? Because you were raised in a world trained to worship logic while ignoring the intuitive realm. You were taught that coincidences have no meaning, that the universe is indifferent, that the unseen is imaginary. And in defending the rational world, you silence the deeper voice within you. But the soul is patient. It does not argue or shout. It waits. And when you are ready, it begins again, sending the same symbols, the same feelings, the same nudges, hoping this time you will listen. Looking back, you may realize that your greatest regrets were preceded by warnings you ignored. You felt the hesitation before you said yes to something that wounded you. You sensed a shift before a friendship dissolved. You noticed the discomfort before a mistake unfolded. And looking back again, you may realize that your greatest blessings were also preceded by signals. The sense of curiosity that pulled you toward a new path, the subtle courage that whispered go, the moment your heart stirred even though your mind doubted. If you trace these moments carefully, you will see the outline of a guiding intelligence that has been with you since the beginning. This introduction is only the threshold. To step deeper requires a willingness to reopen channels of perception that have long been dormant. It requires you to acknowledge that coincidences may not be coincidences at all, but invitations to rediscover forgotten language of your own soul. And once you begin to see this, your world will never look the same. If the introduction reveals a doorway into this subject, the deeper themes that underpin it form the architecture of the entire interior. These themes are subtle yet powerful, shaping the emotional, psychological, and spiritual experiences that most people never fully examine. They operate like currents beneath the visible surface of a river, silent, forceful, always moving, always influencing. When we say the soul sends warnings, we are pointing to a realm of communication that predates language, one that carries truths the rational mind struggles to grasp. To understand these truths, you must begin with the idea that human consciousness is layered, not linear, and that these layers do not speak the same dialect. The conscious mind thrives on order, predictability, and clear explanations. It prefers cause and effect, sequences, and logic that can be traced like steps on a staircase. Yet the soul occupies a different dimension of awareness, one where time is not confined to the present moment, and where meaning unfolds according to resonance rather than rationality. This is why the warnings you receive often arrive through symbolic language rather than direct instruction. A feeling of heaviness might signal that a situation is draining you. A moment of déjà vu might indicate alignment with forgotten intention. A repeated number, word, or image might function as a quiet confirmation of direction. These signs are not accidents. They are messages translated into the only language the material world can carry. The first core theme anchoring this idea is that the universe itself is responsive rather than indifferent. You exist in a woven field of consciousness, not a vacuum, not a mechanical machine, but an interactive fabric sensitive to frequency and intention. Every thought, emotion, and decision emits a vibration that interacts with this fabric, influencing what returns to you. The soul perceives these vibrational movements long before they crystallize into physical form, which is why it warns you through a sudden intuitive pull or a subtle internal alarm. These are not magic tricks or supernatural oddities. They are consequences of living in a universe where energy precedes matter, where the unseen molds the seen. Another guiding concept emerges from the tension between illusion and truth. Humans often mistake comfort for truth and discomfort for danger, yet the soul operates from a vastly different compass. It pushes you toward the truths you avoid, and away from illusions that feel deceptively safe. When you stay in environments misaligned with your inner self, relationships that dilute your essence, habits that drain your vitality, beliefs that stunt your growth, the soul creates friction. This friction appears in the form of repeated emotional patterns, recurring life lessons, synchronicities that feel corrective rather than encouraging. These are warnings in disguise, attempts to redirect you before you fracture further from your authentic path. The theme of alignment weaves itself throughout all these concepts. Alignment is not simply about making the right choices. It is about remembering who you are beneath the conditioning, trauma, expectations, and noise of the world. The soul knows your original imprint, the blueprint of your purpose and potential. When you stray from that blueprint, life feels dense, chaotic, or repetitive. When you move closer to it, life begins to open, flow, and support your growth. The so-called coincidences that appear during these transitions are not random. They are markers of resonance. They are signposts indicating where your inner and outer worlds converge or collide. Synchronicity serves as another foundational idea, a phenomenon that blurs the boundary between inner and outer reality. When meaningful events occur with uncanny timing, your rational mind struggles to explain them, but your soul recognizes them instantly. Synchronicities are not messages from outside forces, but echoes from the deeper layers of your own consciousness, rising to the surface to capture your attention. They remind you that reality is not a solid wall, but a permeable mirror reflecting your internal state. There is also a theme of self-betrayal that must be acknowledged. Many of the soul's warnings go unnoticed, not because they are faint, but because humans have been conditioned to betray their inner knowing in favor of external approval. You learn to silence discomfort in order to maintain relationships, ignore intuition in order to remain polite, dismiss inner alarms to appear agreeable or logical or practical. Each small betrayal disconnects you from the soul's guidance, and each disconnection makes the warnings appear increasingly vague or chaotic. What you call confusion is often the accumulated noise of 100 ignored messages. Beneath all these themes lies a larger concept of remembering, the idea that the soul is not teaching you something new, but reminding you of something ancient, a knowing that you carried long before your identity, beliefs, and personality formed. The warnings you receive are not commands. They are echoes. Echoes of your deeper self urging you to return to alignment, to clarity, to authenticity. When you call these echoes coincidences, you do not erase their truth. You simply delay your ability to interpret it. To grasp these core concepts is to begin seeing the world as layered rather than flat, as meaningful rather than random, as intentional rather than accidental. The soul does not send warnings to frighten you or shame you. It sends them because you are always standing at a crossroads between who you have become and who you were meant to be. And the gentle, insistent signals you dismiss are the compass points guiding you toward your true direction. If the core themes illuminate the structure of this phenomenon, the deeper symbolic narratives give it flesh, voice, and motion. Throughout human history, truths that cannot be fully expressed in direct language have been carried through symbols, myths, and archetypes. These narratives speak to the subconscious in a way that bypasses the rigid logic of the waking mind, entering through emotional resonance rather than intellectual comprehension. The soul itself communicates in this symbolic language, not because it wishes to be mysterious, but because symbolism is the only medium vast enough to translate truths that transcend linear thought. To explore the soul's warnings, we must step into these symbolic landscapes, the ones that unfold at the edges of dreams, intuition, and universal archetypes. Imagine, for a moment, the story of a traveler walking through a vast forest. The path ahead appears clear, but something in the air feels strangely still, as though the forest is holding its breath. A raven cries overhead, circling the traveler 3 times before disappearing into the treetops. The traveler dismisses it as a coincidence and continues onward. Yet in the language of the soul, the raven is not a random creature. It is an ancient symbol of threshold, intuition, and unseen truth. Its circling is a warning, a gesture that something ahead is misaligned. The soul speaks through this symbol, but the mind waves it away, insisting that birds behave randomly. What happens next in the story depends on whether the traveler ever learns to recognize such signs. This allegory mirrors the human experience more than most people realize. Life presents ravens, symbols, signals, intuitive hesitations. Over and over, a repeated dream, a sudden tightening in your chest around certain people, a strange synchronicity appearing 3 times in 1 week. These are the modern equivalents of ancient signs carried by the natural world. But because contemporary humans have replaced symbolic literacy with a fixation on literalism and logic, the deeper meanings go unnoticed. You become the traveler who hears the raven and continues walking, unaware that a warning was offered. Consider another symbolic narrative, one that appears across cultures. The story of the cracked vessel. A person carries a ceramic jar filled with luminous water, a metaphor for inner truth, intuition, or soul essence. Over time, small cracks form along the vessel's surface, barely visible but structurally important. Each crack represents a moment of self-betrayal, a time when a person ignored their inner knowing to please others, conform, or silence discomfort. At first, the water escapes slowly, leaving faint trails that can be wiped away. But eventually, The cracks deepen, and the water drains faster than it can be replenished. Only when the vessel becomes nearly empty does the person realize something is terribly wrong. Yet the vessel warned them all along. The slow drip was a warning. The trail of luminous water was the sign. The soul does not scream. It leaks truth through symbolic fractures until you can no longer deny what is happening. A third symbolic landscape emerges through the metaphor of the double horizon. In this narrative, an individual stands on a shore watching two horizons, the visible one painted across the sky, and the invisible one sensed only in the heart. The visible horizon represents the external world, filled with expectations, obligations, and beliefs inherited from culture, family, and society. The invisible horizon represents the inner path, the direction the soul continuously points toward. Most people learn to navigate by the visible horizon alone, setting their sails according to what is seen and approved. But every so often, a subtle shift occurs, a tug, a dream, a synchronicity that hints at the second horizon. This inner horizon calls silently, often in opportune times, urging the person to adjust their course. But because it cannot be seen with the eyes, only felt with an inner sense, the person dismisses it. The soul continues whispering, pointing toward unseen possibilities, but the external world's noise drowns it out. This tension between the two horizons becomes a symbolic arena where warnings arise. These narratives are not meant to be taken literally. They exist to express truths that are otherwise difficult to articulate. The traveler who ignores a raven, the vessel that leaks luminous water, the individual caught between two horizons. These are archetypal mirrors reflecting the subtle dance between human consciousness and the deeper guidance of the soul. When you call synchronicities coincidences, you become the traveler dismissing the raven. When you ignore your intuition, you become the cracked vessel, losing its essence one drop at a time. When you feel drawn toward a new direction but choose familiarity instead, you stand gazing at the visible horizon while the invisible one tugs quietly at the edges of your awareness. Another symbolic pattern reveals itself through the idea of the inner guardian. Many spiritual traditions describe an unseen presence, not separate from you, but deeply interwoven with your being, that attempts to steer you away from harm and toward growth. This guardian communicates not through spoken language, but through emotional shifts, perceptual changes, bodily sensations, and dream symbolism. When something in your life moves out of alignment, the guardian becomes restless. Its warnings manifest as discomfort that intensifies the more you resist. You feel agitation around certain choices, heaviness around certain people, or clarity that appears abruptly when you least expect it. These internal shifts are not random. They are the guardian adjusting your inner compass, urging you to pay attention. But when you attribute these signals to stress, coincidence, or irrational emotion, you silence the guardian and drift further from your true path. Perhaps the most powerful symbolic narrative is the cycle of the locked and unlocked door. In this story, an individual walks through a long corridor lined with doors. Some doors are locked, others open easily. The soul communicates by nudging the individual away from certain doors and toward others. Yet the human mind, conditioned by ego and desire, insists on forcing its way through locked doors while ignoring open ones. Each locked door represents a path that is not meant for them, an ill-timed opportunity, a relationship misaligned with their purpose, a pursuit that leads to stagnation rather than growth. The open doors represent aligned opportunities, organic connections, and experiences that support expansion. But because humans often romanticize struggle and underestimate intuition, they spend years wrestling with locked doors, calling their effort perseverance, unaware that the soul has been guiding them elsewhere through openings they never bothered to examine. These narratives, though symbolic, carry within them an unmistakable truth. Your soul is always communicating, but rarely in the ways your rational mind expects. The warnings are embedded in patterns, symbols, emotions, dreams, and energetic shifts. They appear in the spaces between events, in the timing of encounters, in the subtle choreography of experiences that seem inexplicable. To dismiss these as coincidences is to cut yourself off from an ancient and deeply personal form of guidance. To recognize them is to step into a world where reality becomes a living conversation rather than a random sequence of events. To understand the soul's warnings on a symbolic or metaphysical level is one thing. To integrate them into the fabric of daily life is another. The spiritual dimension of this phenomenon can feel otherworldly, abstract, even mystical, but its real power emerges only when it is grounded in the ordinary rhythms of human experience. It is within your conversations, your decisions, your relationships, and your quiet moments of reflection that the soul's guidance becomes relevant. Integration is not about rejecting logic or abandoning discernment. It is about learning to engage both the mind and the deeper intuitive self as partners in navigating reality. When you do this, the so-called coincidences you once dismissed begin to reveal a pattern of influence so precise it becomes impossible to ignore. The first stage of integration is simply awareness, not mystical awareness, not supernatural alertness, just a shift in the way you pay attention. Most people move through life in a state of psychological momentum, responding to external events rather than sensing the internal movements beneath them. They react instead of perceive. But when you begin noticing the subtle emotional and energetic shifts that accompany your experiences, you re-enter a state of inner listening that modern life often suppresses. You start recognizing when a situation feels misaligned even before anything bad happens. You sense when a conversation carries a hidden truth beneath the words spoken. You pick up on a strange sense of expansion that arises before a major life change. These perceptions are not dramatic revelations. They are soft awarenesses that guide you gently if you allow them. As this awareness sharpens, you begin to see how deeply interconnected your internal state is with the events unfolding around you. A decision made in fear tends to lead to complicated outcomes. A choice grounded in clarity often opens pathways with surprising ease. When you pay close attention, you notice that friction and flow are more than emotional experiences. They are indicators of energetic alignment. The soul nudges you through these states. Flow signals resonance. Friction signals resistance. But because resistance is not always painful at first, and flow is not always comfortable, many people misinterpret these inner signals. They follow the path that looks practical rather than the one that feels true. They remain in environments that appear stable on the surface but slowly drain their vitality. They cling to relationships that soothe loneliness but suffocate authenticity. The soul responds by increasing its warnings through repetition, discomfort, or synchronicities that attempt to redirect them. Integration requires trust, not blind trust in something external, but trust in your own deeper intelligence. This trust is not naive, it is experiential. It grows each time you follow an intuitive nudge and witness its impact in the real world. Perhaps you avoided a situation that later proved toxic. Perhaps you pursued an idea that unexpectedly transformed your life. Perhaps you listened to your body's quiet alarm and removed yourself from an unseen danger. These moments, small or large, build a foundation of confidence in your inner guidance system. They demonstrate that intuition is not a mysterious power, but a communication tool between your conscious mind and the deeper layers of your being. A major implication of integrating these signals is the way your relationships change. The soul is particularly vocal when it comes to human connections, because relationships shape your emotional environment and influence your growth. When a relationship is misaligned, the warnings often appear early. Subtle discomfort, small betrayals, recurring misunderstandings, a sense of being drained rather than nourished. Many people ignore these warnings because they fear conflict, abandonment, or uncertainty, so they remain in connections that hinder their evolution. The soul, however, continues whispering through emotional clarity. A sudden heaviness around certain people, an unexplained irritation that reveals unspoken truth, or a recurring synchronicity urging you to let go. When you begin honoring these internal messages, you stop forcing compatibility and start recognizing resonance. You find yourself drawn toward people who expand your awareness and naturally distancing from those who compress it. This shift can feel unsettling at first, but ultimately leads to healthier, more harmonious connections. Career and life purpose also become illuminated when you integrate the soul's guidance. Many individuals follow paths chosen for them by parents, by society, by financial fear, or by cultural expectation. The soul often pushes back through boredom, burnout, or a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. These emotions are not personal failures. They are messages. They signal misalignment, urging you to reevaluate your direction. When you listen, you may feel drawn toward new creative pursuits, different environments, or work that aligns with your values rather than your obligations. You begin recognizing that your true purpose is not discovered through external validation, but through inner resonance. Life becomes less about chasing goals and more about aligning with the deeper intention that your soul has held since the beginning. The real-world implication of living this way is that your decisions become more intentional, your boundaries become clearer, and your sense of self becomes stronger. You stop ignoring red flags. You stop explaining away discomfort. You stop silencing your intuition to maintain peace that isn't real. And gradually, the warnings your soul once needed to send become less frequent, not because it has grown silent, but because you've begun to listen without needing to be shaken awake. As you integrate these teachings into your daily life, another profound shift occurs. Your definition of coincidence changes. What once seemed random now appears orchestrated. What once felt meaningless becomes meaningful. You realize that life is not a flat stage, but a multi-layered conversation between your inner world and the greater intelligence that surrounds you. This doesn't mean you interpret every small event as a cosmic message. Instead, it means you develop the sensitivity to distinguish between noise and guidance, between fleeting emotion and deeper truth. You learn to trust the architecture of your experience. Ultimately, the greatest real-world implication of integrating the soul's warnings is the emergence of alignment. Alignment is not perfection. It is coherence between what you feel, what you know, and what you choose. When these align, you no longer stumble through a life of mixed signals and ignored truths. You begin moving with a sense of purpose, clarity, and inner authority that cannot be shaken by external chaos. You begin living from the inside out rather than from the outside in. As we reach the final movement of this exploration, the narrative begins to bend inward, returning to you, not the you shaped by habit or circumstance, but the deeper self that has been listening quietly between the lines. Everything discussed before now, the intuitive whispers, the symbolic landscapes, the core themes of alignment and resonance, the practical integration, has been pointing toward a single realization. Your life has never been as random as you've been taught to believe. The coincidences you dismiss were not accidents. The discomforts you ignore were not trivial. And the synchronicities you laughed off were never just curiosities. They were messages, patterns, signposts, echoes of a wisdom that has been with you long before you learned the language of doubt. In the modern world, the concept of the soul has been treated like a poetic embellishment rather than an active force. But your deepest experiences contradict this dismissal. Every time you felt a truth you couldn't explain, every time you sensed danger before it manifested, every time you knew something without knowing how you knew it, your inner intelligence was revealing itself. Your soul has always been speaking. The question has always been whether you were willing to listen. This final section is not about adding new ideas, but about weaving everything together into a single understanding. That your life transforms the moment you choose to trust the guidance that has been pulsing quietly within your awareness since the beginning. The warnings of the soul are not punishments. They are invitations. They emerge not because you are weak, but because you are capable of far more than you realize. When you ignore them, you are not disappointing some external force. You are delaying your own unfolding. And yet the soul never withdraws, never retaliates, never abandons you. It waits with infinite patience, speaking through feelings, patterns, and moments that nudge you back toward alignment. This patience is not passive. It is persistent. Like the tide that returns no matter how many times it is pushed away, the soul continues to return, offering its wisdom through subtle, almost imperceptible cues. To heed the soul's guidance is to step into a new paradigm of living. It is not the escape from responsibility that some imagine, but the acceptance of a greater one, the responsibility of awareness. When you begin listening, you start to notice the threads connecting experiences that once seemed isolated. You see that your heartbreaks were not just emotional events, but catalysts that redirected your path. You see that your failures were not endings, but thresholds. You see that the people who entered your life at precise times were participants in a choreography far more intricate than chance could produce. These realizations do not inflate your ego. They deepen your humility, because you begin to recognize that your journey is part of an interconnected field of meaning. Transformation begins not with grand gestures, but with a shift in perception. You stop measuring life solely by what is visible. You start feeling the undercurrents. You start recognizing the intelligence that guides you through dreams, intuition, instinct, and synchronicity. You stop dismissing your inner knowing as imagination. You stop tolerating what drains you, because you know misalignment always comes at a cost. You stop calling the same painful patterns bad luck, because you finally understand there were lessons repeating themselves until you listened. In this way, transformation is not a sudden enlightenment, but a steady awakening, a gradual tuning of your awareness to the frequency of your own truth. The real transformation, however, occurs when you choose to act on this awareness. It is one thing to sense a warning. It is another to honor it. It is one thing to feel a pull toward change. It is another to follow it. When you take action aligned with the soul's guidance, life begins to rearrange itself. Obstacles dissolve, not because the world becomes easier, but because your choices harmonize with the direction your deeper self has been urging you toward. Opportunities align with your readiness. Connections deepen. Creativity expands. You begin to feel a sense of participation in the unfolding of your own destiny, rather than feeling pushed around by external forces. The call here is not to adopt any belief system, ritual, or external practice. The call is to return to the most intimate relationship you possess, the one between your awareness and your soul. To live awake rather than asleep. To recognize that your inner world is not a passive observer of your life, but the architect behind much of its unfolding. To stop calling the messages coincidences and start treating them as the language of a deeper intelligence. This is not a request for perfection. Listening to your soul does not mean you will never make mistakes or feel confusion. It means you will navigate these experiences with different orientation, with curiosity instead of fear, with presence instead of avoidance. You begin seeing mistakes as part of your refinement rather than proof of your inadequacy. You understand that confusion is often a sign of inner recalibration, not failure. You realize that clarity comes in waves, each one carrying you closer to alignment. And so this narrative ends not with a conclusion, but with an invitation. Your life will continue either way, unfolding in its own rhythm. But the quality of that unfolding depends on how much of your inner truth you are willing to acknowledge. The next time you feel a strange coincidence, a subtle discomfort, a repeating symbol, a quiet pull, or an unexplainable sense of timing, pause. Ask yourself whether this is merely chance, or whether something deeper is trying to guide you. Ask whether this will be the soul you have ignored for years, trying once again to redirect you, and then allow yourself the courage to listen, even if you do not yet understand the message. Listening is the first act of transformation. Interpretation comes later. The deeper truth is this: your soul has never stopped speaking. It has never abandoned you. It has never doubted your ability to awaken. Every warning, every synchronicity, every intuitive whisper has been a thread leading you back to yourself. The only question now is whether you are ready to follow it.